I'm a 25-year-old female, and this happened when I was 20. I was on a solo road trip through Arizona, trying to reset after a bad breakup. I had taken a week off from work and booked a few cheap motels, planning to drive all the way to New Mexico and back. It was the third day of my trip. Hot, dry, middle of nowhere. I had just passed through a tiny town, if you could even call it that, and was heading down a 2-lane highway surrounded by nothing but desert and power lines. That's when I saw him. A man walking on the shoulder with his thumb out. Looked like he'd been out there a while. His t-shirt was sweat-stained and dusty, and he had a small duffel bag slung across his back. Probably in his 30s. Balding, sunglasses. Not particularly threatening, but not the kind of guy you'd want to be stuck with for long either. I kept driving at first, but then I saw a hand-painted sign just ahead that read, "Next gas 49 miles." I looked at my fuel gauge. I had enough. Barely. But I thought, if this guy's walking, he might actually be in trouble. Maybe his car broke down. Maybe he needed a ride to the next station. So I turned around. He smiled when I pulled over. It wasn't creepy or fake, just a tired, grateful kind of smile. He opened the passenger door slowly, like he was giving me a chance to change my mind. "Thank you," he said. "Just to the next stop is fine." He climbed in, dropped his duffel bag by his feet, and buckled his seatbelt. For the first few miles, we didn't talk much. I had the windows down and music low. He mostly looked out at the desert, occasionally glanced at my dash. Then he asked, "What made you stop?" I shrugged. "You looked like you needed help." He nodded. "Most people don't anymore." He said his name was Jeremy. Said he was headed to Roswell to see family. Claimed his car broke down about 10 miles back. Something about the way he said it felt rehearsed. I asked what kind of car he drove. He paused for a second too long, then said, "A Corolla. Gray. 2007. That stuck with me because earlier, when I passed him, I hadn't seen any car nearby. Just him, on foot, and nothing but dirt and sagebrush for miles in either direction. We kept driving. Then I noticed something strange. His bag, the duffel, had a hospital logo on it. Not something you see every day. I asked, "You work in a hospital?" He looked down like he had forgotten the bag was there. "No, got it at a thrift store." We went silent again. About 10 minutes later, I saw flashing lights up ahead, 2 sheriff cruisers parked on the shoulder. As we approached, an officer stepped into the road and waved for us to slow down. I pulled over. The cop leaned into my window. "Ma'am, have you seen anyone walking along this stretch of road?" I paused. I glanced at the man next to me. His expression didn't change. Before I could answer, he leaned forward and said, "Yeah, I passed someone about 5 miles back. Looked like a drifter." The officer thanked us and waved us on. We drove in silence for the next couple minutes. My heart was pounding. He hadn't hesitated, hadn't even flinched. When we reached a rest stop with a gas station, I pulled in and told him this was as far as I could take him. He nodded, unbuckled his seatbelt, grabbed his bag, but left the door open. Before he stepped out, he leaned in just a little and said, "Thanks for the ride." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Don't pick up strangers anymore." And just like that, he walked off. I sat there for a good 5 minutes before pulling away. I don't know who he was. I don't know what was in that bag. And I don't know why the police were asking about someone on that exact stretch of road. But I do know this. I will never stop for a hitchhiker again. I was 21 when this happened. I just spent the weekend visiting my sister in a small town in eastern Oregon. The plan was to head back home Sunday morning, but I overslept and didn't leave until almost 5 p.m. I didn't think much of it at the time. My car was decent on gas, I had snacks, and I liked driving at night. That stretch of Highway 395 is long and quiet, just open road, pine trees, and the occasional gas station. About an hour into the drive, I noticed someone on the shoulder, A guy with a backpack, early 30s maybe, scruffy, wearing a dark green jacket and jeans. His thumb was out. Normally I wouldn't stop for hitchhikers, but I was in a good mood. The guy didn't look threatening, just tired. So I pulled over. He jogged up to the passenger door and leaned in. He gave a half smile, kind of polite but reserved. "Hey," he said, "just going as far as you'll take me. Headed south." I unlocked the door. He climbed in, tossed his bag at his feet, and thanked me. For the first few minutes it was quiet. He wasn't talkative, and I didn't push it. He mostly stared out the window. But after about 10 miles, he started asking questions. Where was I from? Where was I headed? Did I live alone? At first I thought he was just being social, but his tone felt calculated, casual but prying. Then he asked, "You ever have engine trouble with this thing?" I glanced at him. "No, not really," I said. "Why?" He shrugged. "I used to drive one of these. Same year, same make. That rattle under your glove box? That's your heat shield coming loose. Could fall off any time." I hadn't even noticed a rattle, but sure enough, when I turned down the music and hit a small bump, there it was. A faint metallic clink. He grinned. "Told you." It struck me as odd. Not that he knew the car, but that he noticed something I hadn't, and brought it up before I heard it. I tried to keep the conversation light after that, but he kept shifting in his seat, glancing at the dashboard, then out the window, then back at me. At one point I caught him staring at my phone in the cup holder. The screen was off, but I'd been using GPS. He tapped the screen with his finger. "You heading through Chester?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I'm going straight through Alturas." He nodded slowly. "That's smart. Lot of cops near Chester." Then, a few minutes later, out of nowhere, he said, "You ever wonder how easy it'd be to make someone disappear out here?" I didn't answer. Just gripped the wheel tighter. He looked at me again. "Like, think about it. You pull over to help someone. They get in. You drive for an hour. No cameras, no cell service, no witnesses. Then boom, gone." I forced a laugh. "You're not planning anything, are you?" He smiled but didn't say anything, just stared ahead. That stretch of highway suddenly felt too quiet. I considered pulling over at the next gas station, but we hadn't passed one in miles, and the sun was already down. Then I remembered something. The tire iron in my trunk. I kept it wedged behind the passenger seat. I waited until he leaned forward to adjust the vents. Then I quietly slid my hand between the seats and grabbed it. Just held it there, hidden by my leg. I didn't say a word. We kept driving. Another 10 minutes passed. Then he suddenly pointed up ahead. "There," he said. "That dirt road. Pull off there. I can walk the rest." It was barely visible in the dark. Just a small turnoff into the trees. No signs, no lights. I kept driving. He turned to me. "Hey," I said, "pull off." I tightened my grip on the wheel. "I'll drop you at the gas station up ahead." "There is no gas station." His voice was flat now. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Empty road. I didn't answer him, just kept my eyes on the road. He didn't speak again for the next 5 miles, just stared out the window, jaw clenched. When we finally saw lights, an old truck stop glowing like a miracle on the horizon, I pulled in hard. Before the car even stopped, he grabbed his bag and got out. No thank you. No goodbye. He just walked toward the back lot and vanished into the dark behind the building. I filled up my tank with shaking hands and stayed parked at that gas station until another car pulled in. Then I followed them the rest of the way home. I don't know what that guy was planning, but I'm never picking up a hitchhiker again. I was 19 when this happened. I had just finished a 3-day camping trip with some friends out in northern Nevada near the Ruby Mountains. The plan was for us all to head back together, but my car battery died the night before we were supposed to leave. So they took off ahead of me while I waited for a tow. Long story short, I ended up on the road a full day later than planned. It was just past 6 p.m. when I finally got moving again. I still had over 300 miles to drive home. But I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of the woods and back to my own bed. Somewhere between Wells and Elko, there's this long, empty stretch of highway. No gas stations, no lights, just open land and desert scrub on both sides. The kind of road where you start to feel like you're the last person left in the world. That's where I saw him. Just a shape at first, standing near the edge of the road. A guy, maybe mid-30s, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. Nothing weird about that, except he wasn't walking, he was just standing there. Still. I slowed down, thinking maybe he needed help. He raised one arm, not waving, not giving a thumbs up. Just slowly raised it, like he wanted me to stop. Something about it didn't feel right. It was like he had been waiting for a car to come by. I passed him. Didn't stop, just kept going. I checked my rearview mirror. He hadn't moved. That would have been the end of it. Except 5 minutes later, I saw someone again. Same clothes, same height, same guy. Standing by the road. Except there's no way he could have gotten ahead of me. Not unless he had a car hidden in the desert, and I would have seen that. At first I thought maybe I was just tired. Maybe I'd imagined it. But I kept driving. 10 more minutes, another curve, another ditch. And there he was again. This time he was crouched down, like he'd just climbed up from the side of the road. He stood as I passed, raising his arm again. Same motion. I didn't slow down this time. I just stared ahead, hands tight on the wheel. Every instinct in me was saying, don't stop. I didn't stop. But here's the part that really messed me up. A few miles later, my gas light came on. I knew I was running low, but I thought I had enough to make it to Elko. I didn't. The car sputtered. I barely coasted to the shoulder before it died. It was getting dark fast. I had no signal, no idea how far I was from the next town. I sat in the car for a few minutes just staring at the road, thinking I'd wait until someone passed by, but no one came. What did come was the sound of footsteps in the gravel, off the side of the road. At first, I thought it was an animal, a deer maybe. But then I heard shuffling, slow, human. I locked the doors, turned off the interior lights, sank down in the seat. The footsteps got closer. Then they stopped, right outside my window. I didn't look. I didn't want to. But I could see a shadow stretching across the hood of the car, a silhouette. He was just standing there, not moving, not saying anything, just waiting. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Me hiding in the seat, him standing outside. Eventually, I heard the crunch of gravel again, fading. Then silence. I waited another 30 minutes before I dared to move. Eventually, a semi came by. I waved it down like my life depended on it. The driver let me use his CB radio, and I got a tow. I asked him if he'd seen anyone on the road. He said no. Nothing. I don't know who that guy was, or how he kept getting ahead of me, but I've never driven that road again, and I never stopped for hitchhikers. I'm a 28-year-old male, and this happened about 5 years ago when I was 23. At the time, I was working nights doing freelance photography gigs, small-town events, roadside ads, things like that. One weekend, I had a shoot way out in rural Wyoming. Nothing fancy, just some landscape work for a tourism campaign. The gig wrapped up faster than expected, so I hit the road earlier than planned. It was just past 6 p.m., and I figured I'd drive a few hours back toward Denver before grabbing a cheap motel for the night. About an hour in, I stopped for gas at this small-town station, one of those half-gas, half-bait and tackle places. While I was filling up, I noticed a guy sitting on a bench near the ice machine. He looked rough, mid-40s, weathered face, denim jacket, had a small canvas backpack at his feet and a rolled-up sleeping bag strapped to it. As I pulled out of the lot, I saw him get up and stick out his thumb. I kept driving. But maybe a minute later I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder. I don't know why. Something in me just said, he's harmless. Probably a drifter, just looking to get out of town. He jogged up to the window. "You headed south?" "Yeah," I said. "Denver. That'll do." He climbed in without waiting for me to invite him. The smell hit me first. Not BO exactly, just stale, like unwashed clothes and cigarettes. He placed his bag carefully between his feet and buckled in without a word. I asked where he was headed. He said, "Anywhere but here." Didn't elaborate. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, and for a while, we just drove in silence. About 30 minutes in, he finally spoke again. "You ever pick up hitchhikers?" "Not really," I said. "You're the first." He smirked. "Hope I don't ruin it for the rest." I gave a half laugh, but something about the way he said it stuck in my head. After that, he started talking more. Not in a friendly way, more like probing. He asked if I lived alone, what I did for work, if I was married. Stuff that felt like it had nothing to do with passing the time. I kept my answers short, polite but guarded. Then he asked something weird. "Do you always drive this route?" I said, "Not really. Just came up here for work." He nodded slowly. Then he looked out the window and said, "Strange. This is the second time I've been picked up on this road." I didn't say anything. He continued. "First guy didn't make it to Denver, though." He said it like he was telling me what he had for breakfast. Calm, dry. I stared at the road. My grip on the wheel tightened. I wasn't sure if it was a joke or a test, or worse, the truth. Then he leaned forward slightly, eyes still on the road. "You ever wonder what people carry in their backpacks?" I didn't answer. I just glanced down. His bag was still between his feet. The zipper was open a few inches. Inside, I could just barely make out the end of something. Metallic. Long. Slim. Taped handle. I tried not to stare, tried not to breathe different. Instead, I calmly said, "Hey, I'm actually going to stop up here. Need to make a call. Bad reception out here." He didn't react, just nodded. A few minutes later, I pulled into a rest area, a small one with a single light pole and a soda machine. Nobody else was there. As I parked, I said, "Give me a sec. Be right back." I stepped out, closed the door, and walked around the side of the building. Then I ran. I ran straight into the woods behind the rest stop and crouched low in the brush. I called 911 and told them exactly where I was, whispering like my life depended on it. And then I waited. From my hiding spot, I could see him through the trees. He sat in the car for a while. Then he got out, looked around, opened the trunk. That's when I heard the sirens. He took off, sprinting down the highway on foot. Cops caught him less than a mile away. Inside his bag, they found a 10-inch fillet knife, duct tape, and zip ties. The cop told me, off the record, "You weren't giving him a ride. You were giving him a ride to someone." They never found out who. I'm a 30-year-old guy now, but this happened when I was 24. At the time, I worked for a small moving company based out of Montana. I'd drive across state lines, picking up furniture and delivering it to second homes or cabins. It wasn't great money, but I got to be on the road, which I liked. One Thursday afternoon, I was driving back toward Bozeman from Idaho Falls. 2-lane highway, no towns for miles. Flatland, forest, flatland again. I remember I was dead tired, so I pulled off at this tiny truck stop to grab some gas and caffeine. While I was inside, I noticed a guy sitting on the curb near the vending machines. He had a cardboard sign that just said, "North." He looked like he'd been out there for a while. Mid-30s, unshaven, wearing a beat-up army jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. Beside him was a black gym bag and a plastic shopping bag full of something, maybe food, maybe clothes. I didn't talk to him inside. But when I came out, he stood up and said, "Hey, you headed north?" I said, "Yeah, heading toward Bozeman." He asked, "Mind if I catch a ride?" "Just to the next turnoff near Livingston." I hesitated, but he looked normal enough. Calm voice, clean speech, no twitchiness or red flags. So I said sure. He climbed in, thanked me, and introduced himself as Darren. The first 20 minutes were uneventful. He talked a little, mostly about how hard it was finding work lately, how people didn't pick up hitchhikers anymore. I nodded, made small talk. He seemed harmless. But about halfway in, something changed. He asked if I lived in Bozeman. I said yeah, just outside of town. Then he asked if I lived alone. I gave a vague answer. Roommates. I didn't have any. Then he started commenting on things in my truck. You keep a flashlight in here? He asked, pointing to the glove box. Yeah, I said, just in case. He nodded. Smart. Lot of places to get stuck out here. Then he asked, You got a weapon? I said no. He smiled. You should. That's when I started to regret picking him up. I changed the subject, asked where he was headed exactly. He said, Don't worry, I'll know when to tell you. He didn't say it aggressively, but it was firm, like he was in control now. I decided I'd drop him sooner, anywhere public. About 10 minutes later, I saw a roadside diner coming up, one of those spots with a gravel lot and 2 trucks parked out front. I said, Hey, I need to stop here. Bathroom break. He didn't move, just stared out the window. I pulled in anyway, parked, reached for the door. Then I noticed he hadn't unbuckled his seatbelt. I opened my door and got out, walked around to his side and opened the passenger door. Hey, this is your stop, I said. He didn't even look at me. I said it again, firmer. Nothing. Then he turned to me, slowly, and said, You sure you want me to get out here? He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. There were no people nearby. Just the diner, and it looked closed. I said, Yes. Get out. He sat still for another second, then finally unbuckled, grabbed his bag, and stepped out. Before I could shut the door, he leaned in and said, You should lock this truck when you sleep. Not everyone's as polite as me. And then he walked off toward the woods behind the diner. Not the highway, not the road, the woods. I got in, locked the doors, and drove the hell out of there. I still think about that moment, about how different that ride could have ended, and what was in that black gym bag sitting at his feet. I'll never pick up a stranger again. I don't care how harmless they look.